The year is 1981. For Your Eyes Only is in the box office and topping the charts, and inflation is, well, higher than it is today. But you're living the high life and in need of a new car. You want something luxurious and comfortable, and you have three to choose from: the Cadillac Seville, the Chrysler Imperial, and the Lincoln Mark VI. Which do you choose, and why? Let's take a look at these three vehicles, some of their positive attributes, as well as some of the challenges of owning them. Let's begin with the 1981 Cadillac Seville. The Seville came out in 1980, 1 year after the Eldorado, and it replaced arguably one of the most timeless and elegant vehicles in Cadillac's lineup, the 1976 to 1979 Seville. Quite a hard act to follow. And in following it, it went with a radical styling departure from a more conventional, quote-unquote, sheer look styling, as General Motors' VP of Design used to call it, to the infamous or famous, depending upon who you ask, bustle back. Unquestionably Cadillac in style, it certainly was controversial for the time. And it also did have some elements that you might call one of the original retros, if you will, in terms of vehicle styling, long before that went into vogue again in the 2000 era. And while the car certainly had an unconventional rear-end treatment, the front was rather conventional, with the stand-up Cadillac wreath and crest, hood ornament, as well as the Rolls-Royce style grille. And the Seville, interestingly, shared a number of components with its sibling, the Eldorado, including the windshield as well as the hood, which Cadillac tried to disguise in the early years by putting a larger cap above the grille on the Seville versus the Eldorado. While the exterior styling was certainly controversial, the body fit and finish was actually pretty good for the time, with good paint sheen and quality and good luster as well. Turning to the inside, Cadillac indulged its owners with sybaritic comfort and a myriad of wreath and crests all over the car interior, from the steering wheel to the seat backs to the floor mats to the dash, to almost everywhere that you look, there was a wreath and crest logo. Materials were quite good for the time, aside from the overly faux-looking wood grain instrument panel. And these were very quiet, well-insulated cars. When you drive one, you notice hardly any road noise, little wind noise, just the sound of silence, relatively speaking. And the four-wheel coil suspension with an independent suspension rear actually soaks up the bumps very, very well. So these are great overall driving cars, especially for long-distance travel. The seats are quite comfortable, and the interior has noticeably more room than the Seville that preceded it. Under hood, however, it's a bit less happy of a story, with a series of engines that put out no more than 140 horsepower. The standard engine for the 1981 Seville continued over from 1980, and that was the Oldsmobile-sourced 5.7-liter diesel V8, making all of 105 horsepower and 205 pound-feet of torque, in a car that weighed about 4,200 pounds. Needless to say, this engine was very slow, with 0 to 60 times in about the 18-second range, clattery, which was typical of diesels of the period. Even the Mercedes diesels were quite noisy, and it wasn't overly smooth, as you can imagine, either. There was extra sound deadening in the firewall to isolate the driver and passengers from the sound of the diesel, even more sound insulation than what was in the regularly equipped cars with the gas engine. Along those lines, a no-cost option in the Seville for 1981 was the V8 6.4, Cadillac's 368 cubic inch V8 with cylinder deactivation, including three different modes: a full V8 mode, an imbalanced 6-cylinder mode, and a 4-cylinder mode. Again, this motor made 140 horsepower, 265 pound-feet of torque. And the most unfortunate thing about it was that aside from the V8 6.4 setup, it actually was quite a good motor. This is the same engine that had started life in 1968 as 472 cubic inches, had grown to 500 cubic inches in 1970, and then got downsized to 425 cubic inches in 1977 and down to 368 cubic inches in 1980. So it was a 368 cubic inch big block engine, and quite smooth, reliable, durable, except for the V8 6.4 cylinder deactivation features, which just didn't have the electronics available for executing the technology correct at the time. As an example, modern displacement on demand engines, when they go into four-cylinder mode, if it's a V8, will open the throttle plate and the throttle more to transition the switch from 8 to 4 cylinders more smoothly. This simply just wasn't an available technology in 1981, and consequently it was pretty clunky. The last engine that was available in the 1981 Seville was a credit option, a 4.1-liter V6 that was Buick sourced. This was an enlarged version of the famous Buick 3.8-liter engine, and it made 125 horsepower and 210 pound-feet of torque. It was reliable, if not glamorous, and not very powerful in such a heavy car. So summing up the Seville for 1981, an interestingly styled car, shall we say, especially the Elegante version where you could get a series of dual-tone paints, but a flawed car as well, mainly under hood, with relatively weak powertrains that each had an Achilles heel. On the diesel, everything from the injection pump to the lack of a water separator. On the V8 6.4, the cylinder deactivation system. And the Buick V6 was not a bad engine, just not overly powerful. Let's transition now to the Chrysler Imperial. The Imperial launched to much fanfare in 1981 and with significant press from Frank Sinatra, who sang great tunes. It's time for you to get into your Imperial. And the car came eventually with Sinatra editions that were powder blue with a blue interior. The Imperial was styled in a similar vein to the Seville, but even arguably a bit more avant-garde with its Grecian grille-style front end and a very truncated back end that gave it somewhat handsome, but certainly still controversial looks. Turning to the inside, the Imperial came with a bevy of standard features, including designer Mark Cross leather interior, which, by the way, 1981 is the only year for the box cushion on the upper part of the seat back, as well as the bottom seat bolster. The car also came with standard AM/FM radio, cruise control, 6-way power driver seat, automatic temperature control, tilt steering column, various choices that the buyer could make for the wheels, either wheel covers or cast aluminum wheels, and concealed halogen headlamps that, interestingly, only in 1981 were those inner headlamp pockets finished with chrome trim that was subsequently removed. Buyers also got real crystal keys and crystal ornaments that, again, would also be deleted over the production run from 81 to 1983 and be replaced with plastic. But for 1981, they were real crystal. The Imperial under the hood came with Chrysler's venerable 318 cubic inch V8, which had powered so many vehicles before, but was fitted with an electronic fuel injection system that was introduced in the Imperial and proved highly problematic. The fuel injection system enabled the 318 cubic inch V8 to reach 140 horsepower and 240 pound-feet of torque in a car that weighed a little less than 4,000 pounds. And while that was certainly better than the Seville, it still was not any rocket ship, even by the standards of the time, with 0 to 60 times in the range of about 12.5 to 13.5 seconds. The fuel injection system really was the Achilles heel for this overall engine, and it proved to have a number of electrical gremlins throughout its system. So much so that the car was even outfitted from the factory with a standard automatic shutdown module that would cut the power and effectively turn the key off if it detected an issue. Interestingly, Chrysler chose to have the only way to restart the vehicle after a shutdown to be putting the car in park, cycling the key all the way back to the off position, and then restarting. So if the car stalled while running, a driver could not put the car in neutral and restart it. It required a full cycle turnoff of the key. The fuel injection system proved so problematic that Chrysler recalled it and offered to outfit the vehicles for its customers for free with standard 2-barrel carburetors. And this was not a standard conversion kit. The kit actually cost Chrysler about $2,000 in material costs and contained everything from new fuel tanks to new dashboard computers, as well as all of the necessary underhood components, intake manifolds, carburetors, emission control equipment associated with making the vehicle drivable, reliable, and emissions compliant. I believe the labor hour time for the operation was also something of the magnitude of 15 hours to complete the job on top of the material cost. So similar to the Seville, the Imperial was a interestingly styled, provocative car with a lot of great features, but also suffered from underhood gremlins that dogged the car throughout its brief life and arguably even soured the relationship between Lee Iacocca and Frank Sinatra after allegedly Frank Sinatra's car had trouble starting for him. Last but not least is the Lincoln Mark VI. Introduced in 1980 as a successor to the Mark V, the Mark VI was originally planned to be on the smaller Fox body platform before being shifted by the Ford bean counters to the Panther platform so that it could share more common components with the Lincoln Continental. Lee Iacocca had originally envisioned a more complete lineup of Mark VI vehicles, similar to the Continental division that had been now extinct for decades. Along these lines, he had envisioned not only a coupe, but also a sedan and a wagon. After his departure, some of these models were killed, but a sedan was produced in 1980 through 83, as shown here. While the car was never downsized to the extent that it was originally planned in the transition to the Fox platform, it still lost about 800 pounds versus its Mark V predecessor. And in this case, the downsizing also came with the effect of this overly blocky, boxy styling. To distinguish the car from its other Lincoln brethren, a series of designer editions were introduced, including those by Pucci, Givenchy, Cartier, as well as Bill Blass, each with unique interiors and color coding schemes. More so than the Chrysler Imperial with its twin torsion bar front suspension and leaf spring rear, or even the Cadillac Seville with its 4-wheel independent suspension with coils, the Mark VI's suspension, coupled with its full body-on-frame construction, significantly isolated the driver and passengers from the road around them. Lincoln Mercury division had long prided itself in its ride, and let's say not necessarily the handling, and this car was no exception. After having two engine choices in 1980, 1981 saw only one engine offering in the Mark VI, a relatively reliable throttle body injected 302 V8 making 130 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque. In the previous year, there was also a 351 cubic inch V8 offered, but it was outfitted with Ford's infamous variable Venturi carburetor and didn't make much more power than the fuel-injected 302, hence it was dropped. So when all is said and done, which of these would I pick as my choice for luxury in 1981? Well, if I could, I would take the ride of the Lincoln, the engine from the Cadillac with the cylinder deactivation disabled, and dump those into the styling of the Imperial. Unfortunately, obviously that combination didn't exist, so buyers had to choose between three imperfect machines if they wanted top-of-the-line luxury in 1981 at arguably the height of the malaise era. Thanks again for watching this video, and let me know if you like this new format. Thanks again for watching this video. Please like and subscribe and comment, as that helps the YouTube algorithm serve this up to more individuals. If you'd like to subscribe, please click the icon of the 67 Buick Riviera at the top left, and also check out some video and playlist suggestions for you at the bottom left and right. Feel free to drop me a line via email if you like this new format or you have any comments or suggestions about it. Till the next time, take care.